we continue to celebrate this Easter Sunday, we find ourselves on the road to Emmaus and on a new journey. We are reminded that the journeys have not ended. There are constant new beginnings in the midst of the chaos and the stories surrounding the resurrection. Easter is not an ending. Instead, it signifies a beginning and a new way to see. Jesus in this moment has brought the greatest light ever possible to the darkness and has overcome death. Jesus has defeated the chaos that can come from so much hatred. Many religions, including Christianity, came from people engaging in conversations and stories around trying to figure out how to overcome chaos, creating good from the voids that are truly hurting others. The disciples on the road to Emmaus are still living in the void. They have not yet experienced a risen Christ. They have not opened their Easter baskets, hunted Easter eggs, and worn their best clothes to church. They were on spring break this year during Easter Sunday, and they missed the memo that Jesus has risen from the dead. But here's what's the good news. The story didn't end at Easter. The journeys and the stories continue because Easter is still here. We have more of the story to share and live into and be a part of. The revolution that we talked about from the shack is still happening, and we are called to continue to be a part of it daily. At the same time, this Easter Sunday coincides with our call to focus intentionally on the importance of our earth. Now, while I love Earth Sunday, I do have to note that we as people of faith are called to respond to the needs of creation and our earth pretty much every day and more than just one Sunday. Because from our earliest faithful beginnings, we have recognized that we are called to be responsible for what the Creator has created. Pope Francis has said, "It is our profound conviction that the future of human family depends also on how we safeguard the gift of creation that our Creator has entrusted to us." So let's be honest. We are not very good at taking care of creation. As the video you saw from Green Chalice today reminds us, you do not need faith to see that we have gone too far. Easter continues to be resurrection stories that help us find ways to forgive and live into the damage that we as humanity continues to do. Our relationship to one another is damaged. Our relationship to creation is damaged. Thus, our relationship to Christ and God continue to be damaged. But Easter is what heals and reminds us that love can still overcome that damage if we are able to recognize it and live into it. The Easter story is about Jesus giving us a new type of light and way to see and experience life in new ways amongst all the different journeys that happen. Because we're not always on just a road to the cross. Sometimes we are on a road away from the tomb, or a road on the way to Emmaus, or later with Paul, a road to Damascus. And all of these journeys open our eyes to a new way to see, a new way to find light within the darkness. And yet we must understand and ask ourselves, are we able to recognize Jesus being next to us in the conversations and the movements that are happening? So often, like many of our faith stories, we put the Easter story in a box. We limit it to the Sunday once a year, and we forget that this is the story that changes everything. This is the story that continues in every way, and we are to live because of this story as people a risen Christ with light and love. We are to live up to the challenge to continue to recognize Jesus in new ways and see the world and creation in ways that others may not be able to see. The disciples in today's story recognized Jesus how? How did they finally recognize Jesus? In the breaking of the bread. And through the breaking of the bread, we have come to call Jesus the bread of life. So as we think about creation and creation care, we must also think about the question, are we providing the bread of life to all of God's creation? Because that question goes along with, are we acting and being and living out people who know a resurrected Christ? Are we celebrating those all throughout our earth who need us? The animals, the creatures, the trees, and even the people. Are we able to see beyond the roads that we sometimes find ourselves traveling? Because creation care is complicated. It is not easy to take care of one another. It's not easy to take care of our world. And we are not taking care of those things. And in so many ways, we are stuck, whether we realize it or not, in a very harmful cycle. Often we do not share the bread on our tables. And because we do not know the best ways to share that bread, we do not know the best ways to see a risen Christ. We act like there's not enough to share, but there is. So how do we faithfully respond and share that bread to a world that seems broken? Last week I handed out 7 Easter eggs to the children who joined us. And one of those Easter eggs was chocolate. Every year I intentionally make sure that the chocolate put in the Easter eggs at church come from fair trade chocolate. The farmers who produce chocolate make very little money when working directly with big corporations. Fair traded chocolate ensures that slave and child labor was not used and fair standard wages were agreed upon. Independence, like much of Kentucky, you all realize the complexities of farming. Especially in this new day and age where you're trying to produce more food with less money. It's the same thing across the country with our cocoa farmers. And we are aware of the changes with tobacco and corn and how they affect our day-to-day economy. But sometimes we forget that we can also recognize those same kind of patterns and complexities in other farmers in other parts of the world who are also trying to respond to the same needs of big corporations for little to no money. Nestle chocolate, or Nestle as the company, has come out and said that they have found unfair slave labor and child labor in their work. So then all of a sudden it sounds easy, right? You don't buy Nestle. You go and buy fair traded chocolate. That's what's easy. However, it gets complicated because in my hometown, Nestle is the primary corporation that provides jobs. Those people working in the factory need those jobs, no matter what the higher powers of Nestle are doing or not doing or trying to respond to. And I point this complicated thing out to you on this day of Earth Sunday because these are important questions of recognizing, do you know where your food comes from? Do you know who is being treated fairly and who may not be treated fairly? Are you able to see the whole picture and the bigger picture of what is happening? And if you know those things, and all of a sudden you can find different ways to share. And there is no way to know everything, but it is important as people of faith to start researching those items so that we become a we and not just a me. Find out that information so you can make informed choices on what you eat and where and why. Because we've been called to take care of creation. Because through creation we recognize the Creator. Recognize that the choices you make may not be popular choices. Most people really do not want to see in a new way. They do not want to be a we in a bigger sense. Because it is hard work to see in a new way. To move from the me to the we takes a lot of work. Moving from a caterpillar to a butterfly is actually a very painful process for the caterpillar. There is chaos in that, there's crisis, and that all of these chaos and crisis moments can only be overcome when we recognize that Jesus continues to call us on different roads and different journeys to be a part of the new beginnings that can overcome the spiritual crisis that we heard about. While we know that a butterfly is something that is truly beautiful and a symbol that represents Easter, it took a lot of work for that butterfly to find its beauty. It took death to get to a resurrected Christ. It takes sharing bread to finally be able to see Christ. So are you willing to let the Easter story continue to transform you and continue to find ways to transform all of us? Or are you deciding to stay as a caterpillar? Will you live in a way that gives bread to the whole world and transforms it? Are you going to stay a part of the me? Or start to find ways to recognize that we are a we? We are God's beloved creation. So beloved that Jesus is risen, He is alive, the Lord is risen indeed.